He was carrying luggage to the room. When he said good afternoon to the guest, the man was shocked. You are the communications officer from Iraq, he said. For 20 years, Marcus had carried bags and opened doors at Chicago's most elegant hotel. Silent, professional, invisible. But when Colonel Patterson heard his voice, something impossible happened. The past collided with the present in a marble hallway, and a carefully buried secret came rushing back. This is the story of Blackbird Six, the voice that once guided convoys through Baghdad's deadliest streets, the man who disappeared into civilian life so completely that even he forgot who he used to be, until one afternoon when 3 words changed everything. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to One Human, One Story. Before we begin this story, could there be a veteran hotel worker at your workplace too? Let us know in the comments, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. Marcus Chen had worked at the Chicago Grand Hotel for 20 years. Every day he wore the same burgundy uniform, carried the same brass nameplate, and moved through the marble lobby with quiet efficiency. Guests rarely remembered his face, but they always remembered his service. Polite, professional, invisible. The Chicago Grand was a 5-star establishment. Crystal chandeliers, imported Italian marble, and a clientele that expected perfection without acknowledgement. Marcus understood his role perfectly. Be helpful, but not memorable. Be present, but not noticed. Be professional, but not personal. His shift started at 6 a.m. sharp. First task, always the same check: the guest arrival list, memorize room assignments, and ensure every luggage cart was spotless and ready. Marcus took pride in the details: creases in his uniform perfectly pressed, shoes polished to a mirror shine, brass nameplate positioned exactly 2 inches below his collar. Military precision in a civilian world. The lobby bustled with morning activity: business travelers checking out, conference attendees rushing to meetings, families with children and too much luggage. Marcus navigated through it all like a ghost, moving between worlds without disturbing either. At 47, Marcus lived alone in a studio apartment 10 minutes from the hotel. No family, no close friends, no complicated relationships. Work, sleep, gym, repeat. Simple, predictable, safe. His apartment was spartanly furnished but meticulously organized. Everything had a place, and everything was in its place. The only decoration was a small American flag folded in a triangular case sitting on his dresser. He never looked at it directly, but he dusted it every Sunday. Room 1247 had a special guest that Tuesday morning. Colonel James Patterson, retired Army, arriving from Dallas for a 3-day business conference. VIP treatment requested. Marcus was assigned personally. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was silent. Marcus stood at attention beside the luggage cart while Colonel Patterson studied his phone. The guest was approximately 55 years old, silver hair, military bearing even in civilian clothes. Something about his posture suggested command experience. They reached the room. Marcus inserted the keycard and held the door open. "After you, sir," he said in his trained hospitality voice. That was when everything changed. Colonel Patterson froze mid-step. His head turned slowly toward Marcus. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered on the marble floor. The color drained from his face. "You," he whispered. Marcus maintained his professional composure. "Is there a problem with the room, sir?" Patterson stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. "Your voice. I know your voice." Marcus felt ice water in his veins. Guests sometimes thought they recognized service staff from other hotels. "It happened. I believe you have me confused with someone else, sir." "No." Patterson stepped closer. Marcus instinctively took a step back. "Baghdad, 2003. Radio call sign Blackbird 6. You guided our convoy out of an ambush on Highway 8. Marcus stopped breathing. No one had called him Blackbird 6 in 20 years. "Sir, I think there has been some mistake." Patterson pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos, then showed Marcus the screen. It was a grainy military photograph. 12 soldiers in desert camouflage, standing beside armored vehicles. In the center, Marcus recognized his younger self, Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, Communications Specialist, 3rd Infantry Division. "This is you," Patterson said quietly. "This is definitely you." Marcus looked at the photo, then at Patterson, then at the open door behind him. His training kicked in. "Assess the situation. Identify exits. Control information flow. Colonel, I need you to keep your voice down." Patterson nodded slowly. "I looked for you after we got back. They said you had transferred out, disappeared into the system." Marcus moved past him into the hotel room. He needed to control this conversation. "Can we discuss this privately, sir?" Patterson followed him inside and closed the door. For 20 years, Marcus had worked to stay invisible. In 30 seconds, his carefully constructed anonymity had shattered. The hotel room was elegant. King bed, city view, sitting area with leather chairs. Marcus stood by the window with his back to Patterson. Protocol demanded he maintain his professional role, but the past was pulling him back to a place he had spent 2 decades trying to forget. "You saved 12 lives that night," Patterson said quietly. Marcus turned around. The colonel was sitting in one of the leather chairs. His military bearing had softened into something more human. "We were pinned down by insurgents. No way out. Radio was dead. Then we heard your voice cutting through the static. Calm, professional. Turn left at the next intersection, you said. Proceed 200 meters, then right. We followed your instructions like gospel." Marcus remembered that night. April 15th, 2003. Multiple units under fire. Radio chatter chaotic. His job was to cut through the noise and guide them to safety. "Just doing my job, Colonel." Patterson shook his head. "No, Marcus. You stayed on that radio for 4 hours, guided 6 different convoys through hostile territory. When the shooting started getting closer to your position, we told you to evacuate. You refused to leave your post." Marcus sat down in the opposite chair, the weight of 20 years pressing down on him. "A lot of people did extraordinary things over there. Nothing extraordinary about it. Your radio guidance saved lives," Patterson continued. "But that was not why I have been looking for you." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Why then?" "Because 3 weeks later you disappeared. Command said you had been transferred. No forwarding assignment, no contact information, like you never existed." Marcus stood up and walked back to the window. The Chicago skyline stretched out before him. Normal people living normal lives, far from the desert, far from the chaos. "I needed to disappear for a while." Patterson joined him at the window. "PTSD." Marcus nodded. "Among other things, radio operators saw everything." Marcus continued. "We heard every call for help, every casualty report, every last transmission from units that did not make it home. After a while, the voices started following me, even when the radio was off." Patterson was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I understand, more than you know. But Marcus, there is something else, something I have been carrying for 20 years that belongs to you." Patterson walked to his briefcase and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a bronze star medal. The citation was signed, but never presented. "For exceptional bravery under fire, for staying at your post when others would have fled, for saving American lives through your courage and dedication." Marcus stared at the medal. He had never received any commendation for his service in Iraq. After his discharge, he had been too focused on disappearing to care about recognition. "This was supposed to be presented to you before you left," Patterson said. "When you vanished, the paperwork got lost in the system. I kept it hoping I would find you someday." Marcus picked up the medal. It was heavier than he expected, 20 years of weight compressed into a few ounces of bronze. "I do not need recognition for doing my job." Patterson smiled sadly. "That is exactly what I expected you would say. That is why you deserved it." They sat in silence for several minutes. Outside the hotel room was the present. Inside was the past, 2 timelines intersecting in ways Marcus had spent 20 years trying to prevent. "What do you do now?" Patterson asked. "I work here. I carry luggage. I help guests. I stay invisible. Is that what you want?" Marcus considered the question. For 20 years, invisibility had been safety. No questions about his past. No expectations about his future. Just simple, honest work that let him disappear into routine. "I do not know what I want anymore," Marcus admitted. "The war ended 20 years ago, but some of us are still fighting it." Patterson nodded. "I know the feeling. That is why finding you matters so much. Not just to me, but to the others." Marcus looked up sharply. "Others?" Patterson pulled out his phone again, showed Marcus a group text thread, 12 names. Some Marcus recognized, some he did not. "We stay in touch. Annual reunion. Nothing fancy. Just guys who survived the same desert talking about everything except the desert." Marcus read the messages. Normal conversation. Families, jobs, sports, life after combat. "No one talks about that night," Patterson said, "but we all remember it. We all remember the voice that brought us home." Marcus handed the phone back. "I am not the same person who was on that radio. None of us are. But the voice is still there, still trying to bring people home, just in different ways." Marcus looked around the hotel room. 20 years of service. Different kind of service, but service nonetheless. Helping travelers find their way. Solving helping travelers' limbs. Being reliable when everything else felt uncertain. Maybe you are right. Marcus said quietly. Patterson stood up to leave. "The Bronze Star is yours regardless, but there is something else." He handed Marcus a business card. "Our next reunion is in 3 months. Denver. Nothing formal. Just guys who remember what it was like to trust each other when trust was the only thing keeping us alive." Marcus looked at the card. An address, a date, a chance to stop running from the path. "I will think about it." Patterson shook his hand. "Marcus, 20 years is long enough to carry this alone." After Patterson left, Marcus sat alone in the hotel room. The Bronze Star felt warm in his hand. Outside, Chicago continued its daily rhythm. Inside, something fundamental had shifted. He thought about the other soldiers, 12 men who had survived that night because of his voice, who had gone on to live lives, build families, pursue dreams, who remembered him when he had tried so hard to forget himself. The elevator ride back to the lobby felt different. The same burgundy uniform, the same brass nameplate, but Marcus no longer felt invisible. That evening, Marcus called in sick for the first time in 5 years. He drove to Lincoln Park and sat by the lake watching the sunset. For 20 years, he had been running from Blackbird Six. Maybe it was time to stop running. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Patterson. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for not letting me stay lost. See you in Denver." The reply came immediately. "Welcome home, brother." Marcus looked out over the lake. The city lights were beginning to reflect on the water. For the first time in 20 years, home did not feel like a place he was hiding from. It felt like a place he could finally return to. The next morning, Marcus returned to work. Same routine. Same uniform, same hotel, but everything was different. When guests spoke to him, he made eye contact. When they needed directions, he gave them with confidence. When they thanked him, he accepted it gracefully. He was still Marcus the Bellhop, but he was also Blackbird Six, the voice that brought people home. And for the first time in 20 years, that felt like enough. 3 months later, 12 men gathered in a Denver hotel conference room. Some had gray hair now. Some had put on weight. Some had grandchildren. All of them remembered a night in the desert when one voice had meant the difference between coming home and never coming home at all. Marcus told them about the hotel, about 20 years of invisible service, about learning that helping people find their way had always been his calling, whether through radio static or marble lobbies. They told him about their lives, families, careers, struggles with coming home, the weight of survival when others had not survived. And slowly, over the course of a weekend, they began to remember not just the war, but the men they had been before the war, the men they could still be after it. On the last evening, Patterson stood up to speak. He looked at Marcus sitting quietly at the back of the room. 20 years ago, we lost contact with our communications specialist. We thought he was gone. Turns out he was never lost. He was just serving in a different way, helping different people find their way home. The room stood and applauded, not for Blackbird Six, the radio operator, for Marcus Chen, the man who had spent 20 years learning that service comes in many forms, all of them valid, all of them valuable. Marcus returned to Chicago changed. He still worked at the Grand Hotel, still wore the burgundy uniform, still carried luggage and helped guests, but he was no longer hiding. The Bronze Star sat on his dresser next to the folded flag, a reminder that some honors are worth waiting 20 years to accept, some recognition is worth a lifetime to understand, and sometimes the voice that brings people home is not shouting over radio static. Sometimes it is as quiet as "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you find your way?" Now I ask you, have you ever discovered that someone you see every day has a story that changed your understanding of service? Someone whose quiet dedication masked a past of extraordinary courage. Share their story in the comment. One human, one story. Because sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that speak softest. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never stopped serving. They just changed uniforms. Subscribe if stories like this matter to you, because every hotel worker, janitor, or service employee might be someone who once guided others through impossible situations. Their past may be invisible, but their dedication never fades. Until next time, remember the person helping you find your way today might be someone who spent years learning that bringing people home is not just a mission, it is a calling that never ends.